Has anyone ever said this to you? You're just overthinking it. Stop going in circles. Just relax. It is not that deep. And every time you heard it, you felt even worse. Because you can't just turn your brain off. It replays conversations automatically. It fixates on every mistake. It loops. You haven't done anything physically demanding. And yet, by the end of the day, you're so drained, you can barely move. You're not being dramatic. You're not too sensitive. You're not weak. Today, I want to share something, backed by psychology research, from Yale and the University of Michigan. The reason you may overthink is often linked to being more analytical, empathetic, and perceptive than many people. If you feel drained after every social interaction, if your brain won't shut off at night, if you're constantly anxious about things that haven't even happened yet, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We use real psychology and practical tools to help you understand what drives the mental spiral so you can regain control of your thoughts. Today we're getting into who overthinkers really are, what is actually happening in their brains, and why the most sensitive and perceptive people are often the ones who overthink the most. And none of this is your fault. A lot of people assume overthinking means you're weak, that you're not mentally tough enough, that you're just an anxious person, but the truth is often the opposite. Long-term research from Yale and the University of Michigan suggests that people who get stuck in thought loops aren't lacking willpower. Their brains may have a heightened pattern recognition system. Their minds are constantly scanning the environment, processing information, and searching for hidden meaning and underlying patterns. Think of it like a high-spec computer. Even when you're not running any major programs, the background processes never stop. The fan is always running, the machine is always warm. Your mind works like that machine. You replay a conversation from 3 hours ago because you picked up on a tone, an expression, a subtext that others may have missed. You mentally rehearse scenarios that haven't happened because your instinct is to get ahead of risk, to stay in control. You're lying awake at 2 a.m. not because anything bad happened, but because your brain refuses to power down. It keeps asking, but what if? That is the paradox in psychology. The same thinking style that makes you thoughtful, careful, and deeply empathetic is also the thing that can quietly drain your energy. The sensitivity that comes with it can eventually become what wears you out. In psychology, this pattern is called maladaptive rumination. It is when the mind keeps returning to the same thought loops, fixating on uncertainty, past regrets, and the details of social interactions. It is different from regular thinking. Regular thinking moves towards solving a problem. Maladaptive rumination tends to spin in place. From a neuroscience perspective, this pattern may involve increased activity in brain networks linked to planning, analysis, and internal reflection, even during rest. At the same time, the brain's default mode network continues generating an internal monologue. Put simply, your brain is always online, running self-diagnostics, drafting responses to conversations that haven't happened yet, solving problems that don't exist yet. It is like running your phone 24 hours a day, with dozens of apps open in the background. Of course it overheats, of course it drains fast. And here is the part that makes it even harder to stop dopamine. When you analyze a situation, run through scenarios, and build out a logical framework in your head, your brain can release a small amount of dopamine. Not because you solved anything, just because you were thinking. The act itself gets rewarded. That is why just stop thinking about it is usually ineffective advice. From a neuroscience perspective, this can create a reward loop where your brain feels encouraged to keep going. It is not stubbornness, it is not a simple choice. It is similar to what happens with compulsive scrolling, except in this case, the loop is your own thoughts. Most people don't realize that overthinking rarely starts in adulthood. The seed is often planted in childhood or adolescence. Long-term psychology research suggests that kids who grow up in unpredictable environments are more likely to become chronic overthinkers. Think of environments where rules changed without warning, parents whose moods were difficult to read, and punishments that felt inconsistent or random. To protect themselves, those kids developed a survival strategy. Think ahead of everything, run every possible scenario. If I can predict what is coming, I can avoid getting hurt. That strategy worked. It kept them safe. And then they grew up, and the strategy never got updated to reflect that the danger was gone. Psychologists often divide overthinking into two distinct types. The first is reflective rumination, turning inward to understand yourself, process emotions, and make sense of the world. When it is balanced, this is a genuine strength. It is often linked to higher emotional intelligence and self-awareness. A lot of writers, artists, and therapists think this way. They understand themselves and others at a depth many people never reach. The second is brooding rumination, and this one is different. It is passive, painful, and fixated on the problem itself, without ever moving toward a solution. It can significantly reduce sleep quality. It leads to decision paralysis. It turns every social interaction into something to be analyzed afterward, until the anxiety becomes hard to manage. The tricky part, most overthinkers cycle through both. 1 second, you're genuinely processing something useful. The next, you've slipped into the spiral, and you don't even notice the transition. Cognitive psychologists sometimes describe this as the illusion of progress. You feel like you're working through something. You're essentially running on a mental hamster wheel. Full effort, no real movement. So what does overthinking actually say about a person? In 2013, a study published in Psychological Science suggested that the higher someone scored on rumination, the higher they also scored on cognitive empathy, the ability to understand and anticipate what other people are thinking and feeling. In plain terms, people who overthink often show stronger ability to read others, more attuned, more aware of subtle social dynamics, more tuned in to emotions people don't say out loud. They catch the subtext, they feel the shift in the room. They think carefully about whether something they said might have landed wrong. That is why so many overthinkers become the emotional anchor in their friend group. People come to them to be heard because they actually get it. They understand people in a way that feels rare. But that gift has a real cost. You feel everything, but you can't fix everything. You carry the weight of every possibility, and there is no release valve. The more you think, the more lost you feel. The more sensitive you are, the more exhausted you get. That is the contradiction many overthinkers live with. Psychology often points to something a lot of people resist hearing. Your brain can't always think its way out of everything. Some things have to be felt, decided, or let go of, not analyzed indefinitely. You can't think your way into knowing how to swim. You have to get in the water. You can't think your way into riding a bike. You have to try and fall. A lot of emotional pain, relationship friction, and life decisions aren't math problems. There is no perfect solution waiting after enough analysis. You can think forever and still not arrive anywhere. Therapists who work with chronic overthinkers know this well. The goal of treatment is never to make someone stop thinking. It is to change their relationship with their thoughts. One of the most effective tools for this comes from acceptance and commitment therapy. ACT, which includes a process called cognitive diffusion. Here is what it looks like in practice. When your brain says, "This is bad, and I need to figure it out right now," instead of following that thought down the rabbit hole, you shift to, "My brain is generating a worry right now." That is it. That small reframe creates enough distance between you and the thought that you're no longer being pulled along by it. You start to see thoughts for what they are. Mental events. Not facts, not instructions, not reality, just thoughts. I want to say something directly to everyone who has been exhausted by their own mind. Overthinking isn't a character flaw. It is not emotional instability. It is not proof that you're weak. At its core, it is a highly active brain that learned, in a world that once felt uncertain and unsafe, to stay on guard. You don't need to be angry at yourself for it. You don't need to reject this part of you. And you definitely don't need to force yourself to become someone who doesn't care about anything. Your sensitivity, your intelligence, your empathy. Those are your strengths. They're not the problem. What you actually need isn't to stop thinking. It is to gently, patiently remind your brain, I'm safe now. I don't have to stay on alert every second. It is okay to rest. Every thinking pattern we have was shaped by experiences we didn't choose. Understanding that isn't about erasing the pattern. It is about regaining some control over your own mind. And that shift often starts with understanding yourself. If this video made you feel seen, or if you know someone who lives inside their own head, like this, share it with them. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what is coming next. And drop something in the comments. What do you overthink about the most? We're all here together. You're not alone.